At the centre of the storm is Meghan Markle's upcoming appearance at a luxury event in Australia known as the Besties Retreat.
Meghan Markle and Prince Harry have been shut out of Australia, and there is a huge fallout. A beautiful Australian petition is going viral on the internet, and Prince Harry and Meghan Markle might be the targets of one of their most embarrassing rejections to date. Why is the once celebrated pair becoming unpopular in Australia? Could the British royal family experience a new crisis as a result of this backlash? Come along as we reveal the drama, the panicked petition, and the unanticipated royal turbulence. The declaration that ignited Australia. The Sussex camp likely had higher expectations when they announced that Harry and Meghan would be returning to Australia in April 2026. Without mentioning royal responsibilities or formal position, the release outlined a variety of private, commercial, and charitable events throughout Sydney and Melbourne. It was nothing that ought to have alarmed anyone, yet it did. It was widely shared on social media, news websites, and royal commentary channels as soon as it was released. And in a matter of hours, the reaction had clearly become hostile, proceeding more quickly than anyone in their camp could have ever predicted. When they were still newlyweds and working royals, Australia last saw them in October 2018 during a 16-day tour of the South Pacific. To see them, throngs of people flocked to Bondi Beach, Taronga Zoo, and the Sydney Opera House. For perhaps 30 seconds, people lined the streets for hours. There was a sense of occasion that went beyond the typical royal visit because Meghan was pregnant with Archie at the time. The mood reflected the country's sense of genuine selection. Cheers, flags, and the kind of warmth that is impossible to create. It was precisely the kind of welcome a working royal would like. This journey did not resemble the previous one at all. Harry reportedly received a 5-figure speaking fee after being scheduled to give a paid keynote address at the Interreg Psychosocial Safety Summit in Melbourne, a workplace mental health conference where tickets cost up to $1,500 each. Meghan, meanwhile, was named as the guest of honor at a 3-day luxury retreat in Sydney called Her Best Life. The $3,199 ticket included a gala supper, a stay at the Intercontinental Sydney Coogee Beach, expert styling, and a picture with the Duchess. When combined, the two interactions provided a reasonably clear picture of the nature of this visit. The pricing has a negative impact on Australians who were already facing significant strain from the cost of living. A Change.org petition surfaced a few days later. The reasoning was simple. Because Harry and Meghan left their royal duties in 2020, they no longer represent the crown, and anything they do in Australia should be considered a private business trip that they paid for themselves. With federal politicians weighing in, royal commentators on both sides of the debate, and media figures from outside Australia boosting the issue, what started out as a petition swiftly expanded into something far larger. The Sussex camp joined a PR storm that hadn't even peaked, contrary to their expectations of arriving on a wave of goodwill focused on philanthropy and mental health. What had begun as a minor grievance turned into a much larger issue as the backlash intensified, something Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were unable to overlook. How, therefore, could a normal visit become such a potent public response? What does it tell us about the current attitudes of Australians towards them? The petition that represented the country. Most petitions are unsuccessful. After gathering a few hundred signatures, they might be briefly mentioned someplace before disappearing. This one didn't. Thousands of people quickly signed it, and the remarks were remarkably direct, angry, forthright, and bluntly honest. The comment area provided a good view into how Australians today feel about the Sussexes. In the words of one commenter, the pair could easily pay for their own visit because they had access to more money than most people would ever see. Another characterized the trip as self-aggrandizing, narcissistic, and little more than self-promotion disguised as something significant. Even more straightforward was a third response, not a single penny of government funds. A fourth presented it almost as a legal argument. The late Queen set the parameters. Harry and Meghan chose to distance themselves, and that choice had repercussions. They should be considered as private persons traveling for business. The fundamental theme of the petition remained constant. Support should only be given to working royals performing official duties, not to private individuals engaged in commercial activity, since any security, logistics, or coordination requires actual public funds. For many, their relationship with the Crown is now more symbolic than practical. But among Australians, Harry still has a certain amount of real fondness. His charisma, combat experience, and support of mental health have made a lasting impact. Meghan's reaction is more nuanced. Due to conflicting opinions about the couple's absence from royal duties and media storylines, public opinion of her is more polarized. Some Australians believe that the couple's business endeavors, Netflix, Spotify, and Harry's book, have made it harder to distinguish between personal branding and public duty. It's interesting to see that Meghan takes most of the criticism, but Harry frequently comes out of that view quite unscathed. Whether it's just or not, public opinion has adopted that dynamic. For many Australians, the sentiment is mixed rather than wholly negative. They may still be fond of Prince Harry, but they have much less faith in Meghan Markle. How, then, could love and exhilaration give way to skepticism and criticism? And why does that shift now feel so intimate? The icy welcome. Not only was the 2018 tour well received, it was a phenomenon. Bondi Beach was completely packed with people. Children waved flags at a motorcade that drove by in 30 seconds while standing outside the school gates for hours. The articles written by journalists who were meant to cover the tour ended up seeming more like fan letters. Australia provided Harry and Meghan with the kind of warmth that is impossible to create or anticipate. They were young, unashamedly in love, and had a looseness about them that formal royals seldom manage. According to Valentine Lowe's book Courtiers, Meghan was overheard wondering, "What are they all doing here?" and calling the scenario ridiculous during their presentation at the Sydney Opera House, where huge crowds had assembled especially for them. It seems that staff had to clarify that individuals came out because they had a strong bond with the monarchy. It's actually difficult to tell if that's exactly what happened or if it was sculpted by people with agendas, but it stayed. It turned into one of those minutiae that critics kept bringing up, weaving it into a larger narrative about a lady who, in their interpretation, was impatient with the very organization that had made her famous. People's opinions in Australia started to change when Megxit became a hot subject in January 2020. 57% of Australians still supported the monarchy, according to a Roy Morgan survey conducted following Charles and Camilla's October 2024 visit. Although it was still a majority, public support had increased upon Queen Elizabeth's passing in September 2022. Support has been steadily waning ever since. Growing mistrust of Harry and Meghan that went beyond ordinary royal weariness accompanied that change on a personal level. The main grievance was straightforward. You can't quit the organization and continue to use it as a calling card. With a message of self-reliance, genuineness, and living according to their own terms, Harry and Meghan left. However, without the formal obligations associated with them, the subsequent tour and appearances frequently had the appearance and feel of official royal visits, crowds, ceremony, and the weight of the Sussex name. It was dubbed "having it both ways" by critics, and it grew more difficult to overlook that paradox in Australia, where the love had previously been so sincere and straightforward. For many Australians, the question was whether Harry and Meghan's actions matched their promises, rather than merely what they were doing. The question of whether they were leading the life they claimed to have chosen, or something very different, became inevitable as money, messaging, and image started to tug in different directions. Nobody could overlook the money question. It was a simple issue that kept coming up. Where is the money coming from? Harry and Meghan have maintained a strong emphasis on public service and humanitarian activities ever since they declared in January 2020 that they were taking a break to become financially independent. However, the revenue sources that support that image have never been completely disclosed. The The financial picture appeared straightforward at first after departing. They inked significant contracts with Netflix and Spotify that easily facilitated their transfer. After just one season of Meghan's podcast Archetypes, Spotify shut down in 2023. Depending on your point of view, this was either a consensual decision or a commercial failure. Meghan's lifestyle material continued to attract both viewers and criticism in about equal measure on Netflix. Since then, paid speaking has grown to be a significant source of revenue. Harry reportedly received a mid-five-figure fee for the Melbourne summit, which is not out of the ordinary for well-known speakers, but nonetheless noteworthy. According to reports, Meghan's estimated rates are far higher. For significant appearances, some estimates put her in the high six- to seven-figure range. The most obvious example was the $3,199 Her Best Life retreat in Sydney, which featured a gala dinner, a photo opportunity, and a stay in an opulent hotel. Critics noted that a large portion of this model seems to depend on the same things the couple claimed to be leaving behind: the royal titles, the connections, and the international prominence associated with the British monarchy. They contend that the commercial worth would probably decline dramatically in the absence of the Sussex name. It is a challenging argument to outright refute, and the Sussex camp has mostly refrained from doing so. Even when silence isn't meant to be construed as confirmation, it can frequently be in such circumstances. But their supporters have a point. Legally or morally, there is nothing intrinsically wrong with private individuals making money from speaking engagements or commercial appearances. There is no proof that public monies are being used, and event organizers willingly opt to pay those costs. In particular, Harry's advocacy for mental health is generally regarded as sincere. Many individuals can relate to his candid discussions of loss, worry, and personal challenges. However, there is a tension that exists even among sympathizers. There are still unanswered questions about the timing, scope, and framing of these endeavors. And as the criticism intensifies, it starts to indicate that there is more going on within the British royal family than just one visit or petition. Australia reopened the royal family rift. Many people who were closely observing the Australia situation felt that the petition and the indignation behind it had nothing to do with Australia. That was only the surface. What's really motivating it is an issue that hasn't been adequately addressed yet. What exactly are Harry and Meghan now? What do they represent? And to those on both sides, what do they stand for? Perhaps even more unsettlingly, did they harm the royal family in a way that could be fixed? Or, regardless of how many years go by or how many meticulously orchestrated reconciliatory images are shot, is this the kind of rupture that leaves a mark that never truly goes away? Harry and Meghan announced their retirement as senior royals on Instagram in January 2020. The media called it Megxit right away. Within days, Queen Elizabeth called a conference at Sandringham, which observers claimed had little actual precedence. According to reports, the pair had suggested a hybrid structure in which they would pursue independent jobs while continuing to perform some royal tasks. That notion was turned down. In the end, they had a much cleaner break that was less flexible and stricter than they had anticipated. Interviews, movies, publications, and even court suits have all examined the fallout, the discussions, and the agreements that followed. An important turning point was the Oprah interview in March 2021. Reconciliation became much more difficult for many people at that point. The assertion that a member of the royal family had voiced worries regarding Meghan's unborn child's skin tone was one of the most contentious claims. That accusation caused a strong outcry throughout the Commonwealth, resonating well beyond Britain. Then, in January 2023, Spare arrived, further intensifying the situation. Harry presented Charles in a way that severely unnerved palace officials, described what he claimed was a violent altercation with William, and gave critics a constant flow of information that kept the dispute alive in the public discourse. Harry's legal attempt to reclaim taxpayer-funded police protection while in the UK was unsuccessful, by the beginning of 2025. He informed the BBC that Charles was no longer talking to him because of the security dispute following that verdict. In addition, he said something more intimate. He wanted reconciliation, but didn't know how long his father had left. It seems feasible for a little moment. Tensions appeared to be lowering at a private meeting at Clarence House in September. However, the change was short-lived. A few weeks later, Harry reportedly made direct contact with the Home Secretary to ask for a re-evaluation of his security measures. The goodwill that had been developing seemed to crumble very instantly. According to reports, a royal advisor said that some people thought an official peace accord was a cup of tea and a slice of cake. The fundamental truth remained the same when Harry and Meghan got ready for their trip to Australia in April 2026. They continued to have a very tense relationship with the royal family. Furthermore, there were no obvious indications that things were going to get better. And that's where this story leaves us. What started as a planned visit to Australia turned into something far bigger, a flashpoint that exposed questions that have been building for years. This was never just about a trip. It became a referendum on identity, on expectations, and on whether Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have truly found a stable place between royalty and private life, or are still navigating a space that the public hasn't fully accepted. Australia didn't create that tension. It revealed it. The petition, the backlash, the criticism, they were symptoms of something deeper. A growing uncertainty about what the Sussexes represent now and whether their actions match the story they've told about independence and reinvention. At the same time, the reaction says just as much about the public as it does about them. Expectations around royalty are changing. The line between public duty and private ambition is being redrawn in real time, and not always in a way that's clear or consistent. And for the royal family, the implications are just as significant. Because this isn't happening in isolation. Every interview, every book, every appearance continues to shape a narrative that connects back to the institution they left behind. A family dynamic that remains unresolved and very much in the public eye. The question now isn't just whether relations can be repaired. It's whether enough trust still exists on either side to even attempt it. For Harry and Meghan, Australia may be just one stop. But the reaction they've faced there feels like something more lasting, a signal that public sentiment has shifted in ways that are harder to predict and even harder to control. And for the monarchy, it's a reminder that the past doesn't stay contained. It follows. It evolves. And sometimes it resurfaces in places and moments no one expects. This isn't just fallout. It's a